Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We begin with a daring Special Forces rescue operation to get American diplomats out of Sudan, where fighting continues as two top generals there jockey for power. The State Department says security conditions aren't expected to improve anytime soon and has temporarily suspended operations at the U.S. Embassy in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Meanwhile, there are still hundreds of American citizens stranded in Sudan, where the airports have been closed for days. For more now, we turn to national security correspondent David Martin. David, good morning.
Good morning.
So this operation was high risk. You had U.S. forces flying 800 miles from Djibouti to Ethiopia, then launching from Ethiopia to Sudan, and had to go all the way back to Djibouti at the end. Airlifted about 100 people out of the U.S. Embassy. How did all this come together?
Well, distance was the primary challenge here. 800 miles, helicopters just can't go that far, so you had to set up this forward staging base in Ethiopia where they could top off before the aircraft went into the embassy in Khartoum. The other thing was the uncertainty of whether or not they were going to be shot at. Both generals of these two warring sides had been warned in no uncertain terms, do not interfere. But you couldn't count at that because we've seen all these ceasefires break down. So the aircraft went in at night, low level, and they had 100 special operations commandos on board. Those commandos set up a perimeter around this landing zone that was just outside the embassy and guarded that perimeter while the diplomats boarded the helicopters. Overhead, there were two C-130 aircraft, one of which was for communications. The other was a gunship ready to take anybody who tried to approach the embassy under fire. They were on the ground for a little more than half an hour. Wow. No shots for fire. And then they were back on their way. Somebody called it a pretty easy in and out, but it was a long and grueling night. I mean, from start to finish, it was 17 hours.
And it was so high risk. This sounds like as best as could possibly be expected, but there are still hundreds of American citizens who are on the ground. There was no plan to evacuate them. These were just government personnel pulled out. The State Department and the Pentagon say they'll do what they can to help Americans get out. What does that mean?
Well, it certainly doesn't mean going in and seizing the airport and doing the normal kind of evacuation aboard airliners out of there. What it means is conducting reconnaissance along this land route that goes from Khartoum all the way over to Port Sudan on the Red Sea, which is a 12-hour drive under the best conditions. So they can conduct reconnaissance over that, and then they can have U.S. Navy ships waiting to take in any Americans who make that drive. But that, again, will be at a minimum a long and grueling drive, and the conditions are just chaotic.
No, and it is such a high-risk environment. David, thank you very much for all of your reporting.